we'll get started. All right, let's get started with our Tuesday, July 5th meeting of the Admin Public Works Committee. So first item on the agenda, the roll call. Carla.
Okay, Chair Garitano,
Here.
Councilmember Bertolino,
Here.
Councilmember Clark, here, Councilmember Edens, Councilmember Farmer,
Here.
Councilmember Hopper, Councilmember Jaxie,
Here.
Councilmember Nyan, and guest, Councilmember Rambo.
50 seconds left. Just kidding. All right. Thank you for that roll call, Carla. So next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes for the June 7th meeting. Is there a motion for approval of the minutes made by Councilmember Farmer, seconded by Councilmember Clark? Are there any questions, comments on the minutes? All right. Seeing none, all those in favor of approval of the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone oppose or abstain? The minutes are approved. Next item on the agenda is public participation. We have several guests here. So Carla, do you have any cards?
I do. I have two cards. The first is James Vanek, and I have a hand up for that I will pass out as he comes up.
Okay, thank you. And welcome, Mr. Vanek, to the Admin Public Works Committee. Good to see you again.
Good evening. Okay, so last Tuesday, I was invited by Councilman Harder to address the county council regarding trying to reapportion money that acting director of the county for roads and transportation. This is a supportive arguments towards funding of the roundabout project at Old State. I think, personally, I think it's compelling, but we'll see. The fortunate thing that came out of the meeting was I got the opportunity to meet people like Joe Kalesa and Stephanie Streeter from the county, and also Jim Wiles from East West Gateway. And I talked to him at length regarding the problems on Old State. And I had some very constructive discussions with them. They seem interested in addressing those issues. What I'm here for tonight is to hopefully enlist the support of this committee and even the city council in supporting either a resolution or a petition, hopefully unanimous, supporting some sort of help for Old State. So that's why I'm here. Hopefully you read these arguments. Hopefully, all of you know how bad Old State has been for decades. And hopefully you'll get on board with this and help us in urging the county to address these issues that have been gone on for decades and needs to be addressed. And I realize that some of the other wards, this isn't your problem, but we're all residents of the same community. And if there was a dangerous situation in another part of Wildwood that I knew about, I would be totally on board to get that corrected. And hopefully you feel the same way regarding our situation in Old State. So thank you for the time to address you tonight. And that's all I have. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Vanek. Next speaker card.
Our next guest speaker is Patrick Barnage.
Hi.
And just what's your name again and your ward location?
I can give you the first. I don't know the second. Patrick Barnage. It's Barnidge. We live at 744 Spiceberry Lane, which is at the intersection of Spiceberry and Old Slave Road. So we are petitioning to have our street name changed. We moved from the city with our 4 kids out about 3 years ago. And I'm here to represent our street. We think it's more reflective of who we are and what we think the name of the street should be. Thank you.
Okay, and thank you, Mr. Barnage, right? Did I get it right? Okay, great. All right. Carla, do we have any other comments submitted or online? Okay. Okay, great. So thank you for that. So appreciate our speakers coming forward tonight on a very hot day here. We'll move on to the next part of our agenda, which is administration. So under for information, the update on accessibility, Councilmember Clark has provided some information. So I'll defer to you to speak on this.
Thank you, Chair Giratano. Yes, the first attachment is a list of questions, and we've been talking about the resident survey, and hopefully we can attach some of these questions to it. And I just wanted to throw it out there and get your ideas if we have everything that needs to be on there concisely, and if not, to send me an email of what you think we should add to that or change or take off of the list, possibly. And the two last attachments are pictures of maps of the city. And I'd like to have a meeting with Chair Garetano and Steve Cross and Rick Brown. But I first want to make sure that everyone is on board with going that direction. Right now, we need to wait just a little while before we make a good plan for the accessibility plan, because we need to have the input from the residents first. So in the meantime, I thought maybe we could look at this map. The map shows color-coded and pattern coded accessibility areas within cities. These are 2 cities, Hamilton and Auckland. They're both in New Zealand. When I was in China the second time, my son was in 7th grade, and in 7th grade, he went to the British International School. And I had to go with him to interpret every day because he's deaf. And in the social studies class, which was very interesting, the teacher was from New Zealand. And so he used all the examples from New Zealand, which was very impressive, their layout of their city and the infrastructures of their cities there. So I looked them up first on the internet, and these pictures came up of the cities, which give us a really quick overview of what I'm talking about. We would, of course, have to adjust them for Wildwood, but just if you think that that's a good thing for us to proceed with, I will go ahead and have the meetings. If you don't think that that's, as a group, if we think we should work on something else and not take the time of Mr. Brown on this, I'll look at something else.
Any comments from city staff on this? We should take into consideration.
Mr. Chair, when Councilmember Clark sent that to you and I, my response was, and I can't recall if Mr. Brown was included on it, but I certainly sent it to him and said, let's talk about it and see what we can do here in the city. So I think there's merit in it. And I think it's worthwhile. It's worth having a discussion about to see if that's something that we can do for the city.
I'm getting consensus here. I know it's for information items, so any other questions or thoughts, but otherwise I think we're good to keep moving forward with that. So thank you so much for that. And, I think just all the work that you're doing to bring it to the attention of the council and everyone, it's good that we're making some good progress there. Okay, next is the Deer Management Subcommittee meeting with White Buffalo. And I will defer over to City Administrator Cross for that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Briefly, at the last committee meeting, which I was out of town, so I was not at, but Mr. Brown gave me an update that evening. While I was on vacation, he did not want me to have fun, so he called me and gave me an update. So anyway, he did do a download. And actually, it was me calling him, so that tells you how crazy I am. But anyway, the two things came out of that, two to-dos, if you will. Number one was for the city attorney to draft some legislation for a no-feed ordinance. Mr. Young and I spoke briefly about that after that meeting. You'll notice that Mr. Young is not in attendance tonight, either in person or virtually. He is out of town, out of the country, actually, and he did not get an opportunity to draft that, but he has committed to have that available at our August meeting. So we will look at that draft ordinance next meeting. The other item that came out of it was that Mr. Brown, Captain Mundell, and I were asked to have a meeting with the White Buffalo folks. Mr. Rambo had provided contact information, and so we set up a meeting, a Zoom meeting with them. And so the three of us, again, myself, Rick Brown, Captain Mundell, met with them on virtually on last Wednesday. Had a good conversation. Didn't get into a whole lot of depth because there are so many steps that have to occur prior to that, but they did give us an overview. Mr. Brown did summarize our meeting in the memorandum that's part of your package. But we talked about, their organization, got a little background on their organization, got some information in terms of what they've done in the area, who they've talked to, what they've done. And again, that's spelled out in Mr. Brown's memorandum. I think we can go a little bit deeper with those municipalities in terms of what was done. We talked about cost. We talked about timing. They started getting into all the things that have to happen in terms of looking at topography and communication with residents and the list of what's involved in terms of implementing a program like this is quite extensive. But it was a good first meeting. Certainly at some point in time, if the council, the full council decides that, we want to go down this road as one possible alternative to deer management, bring them before this committee and certainly the full council. It's quite expensive. We did talk about some costs and so forth. So again, Mr. Brown did a very good job in terms of summarizing, what we talked about then. But again, lots of further conversation.
Thanks, Mr. Cross. Did have a thought as you were talking about it, and you had a conversation with White Buffalo, but maybe with your connections with some of the other cities that they've mentioned working with. I wonder, have you thought of maybe talking to them and seeing if there's any feedback that they want to share? Coming from a fellow city administrator to another one, or?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I have thought about that, and I'm glad you brought that up. I think that would be with the direction of this committee, if they'd like, because I work with each one, the city administrators from most of these cities that they've indicated that they are working with: Chesterfield, De Pere, Ellisville, Manchester, Sunset Hills, Town and Country. most of those city administrators, we meet on a monthly basis and we talk about all things city administrator like. And so that would be a great opportunity to focus that conversation on what the White Buffalo folks have done in those particular municipalities. So I'd be happy to do that if the committee would like me to do that.
I think it would be helpful to get insight, so that way preparing for further conversations with White Buffalo, we have some more information in our back pocket that we can ask. So I've got Mr. Bertolino with your hand up.
Yeah, Joe and Steve are before you have those conversations, further conversations with those other cities and so on. Are we at a point where we really need to move back to the council a firm recommendation? I think the further discussion with White Buffalo, which is great because I think that's where we're going to end up. But at the same time, if the council as a whole puts up a stop sign and says, hey, my constituents don't want to hunt the deer, okay, period, then all of our discussions with White Buffalo are superfluous. Are we ready and should we take something back to the council that says, after all the discussions and all the great work Dr. Rambo has done, so on, here's 3 things or 4 things we really got to do if we want to control the population? And non-feeding is one, but the baiting and shooting by White Buffalo is the only way to really effectively do it. Are we ready for that?
I think that was the intent of the committee last time, is that we wanted to bring it. Initially, you might remember, I think I even suggested bringing it to the council, but it kind of felt like it would just end up getting kicked back to us to get more details, more information, like to bring something a little more concrete, like actual proposal. And so that's what prompted the conversation with White Buffalo. And that's why too, I'm asking the question even now, like, can we get just even some, feedback from other cities, just so that we know what we're going into and bring forth. I think that it will have to go to the council, but I think your point of view is also a good one too, because we also don't want to get too far, invest too much time if the whole council has, let's say, a different opinion. So I guess the question is really, where's the right place, right, for us to figure out how much information is enough? And we all know the council, right? So if we went there at a very high level, I think they would have just said, all right, get more detail to be able to do that. So that probably is something we need to decide. What do you think, Dave? I mean, okay. All right.
I just had another question. Did White Buffalo give you their, they see our numbers, so do they realize how? And then do they give their opinion on what is the best way to do it? Organization or looking at our numbers, should they recommend us into it? And then my second question, when you do this as council, is this something that will be presented as an ongoing program? Looking at these numbers, this is not like in 1 year to do this. And when I looked at some of these numbers, one the first year they get a lot, and then it might get a little bit, then it goes up again. So it looks like this will be a long-term solution, not going to thinking we'll do this once, but this might become like a regular budget item every year. So I feel like we need to know the answer to that too.
Councilmember Nyan, I can answer most of those questions actually. In the conversations with the representatives from White Buffalo, first of all, they said that on average, it's a 10-year process from the time a municipality starts talking to the time that action is actually taken. Now, that doesn't mean that we're at the beginning of that 10-year process. We might be at year 7 or 8 or 9. So we've been having ongoing conversations in the city about, do we need to do something about the deer population? So it's something that we still have a lot of work to do. It is an ongoing thing. There's a concerted effort to cull the herd at the beginning, and there's a significant cost attached to that. But you're absolutely right. When you look at the numbers, potentially there's constant adding to the herd. Okay, and so yes, there is a maintenance component to that. It is not a one and done. So there is an ongoing maintenance and there's an ongoing cost to do that. Now, there are alternatives to White Buffalo that at some point in time we can talk about. But in terms of White Buffalo and their experience, for instance, they recently worked with Town and Country, and they started with sterilization. That lasted about 2 years, and then they found that that was not a viable method. So White Buffalo is pretty much 100% sharpshooters. They're saying that's the methodology. The others, for various reasons, be it relocation, be it sterilization, be it whatever, they don't feel that it doesn't get to the numbers that they've been told that perhaps the city of Wildwood might want to get to. So it would pretty much be that. Mr. Bertolino raises a good point, and I want to just make sure whatever this committee decides, if it stays with the committee or ultimately goes to council, I think this is a topic that is extremely sensitive, extremely emotional, and we need to control the narrative. Each and every coffee with the mayor, just about, and we have one coming up on Thursday, somebody asks about it. I think we need to make sure that we just continue to talk in general terms, that we're still looking at it. We're having ongoing conversations. We're getting close to perhaps, seeing where the council stands. But I think if we get into any more detail than that, that we've talked to White Buffalo or whatever, I think will be detrimental to the city. And I think we need to make sure that we keep the lid on this for now until the city, including the council, including the residents. And the residents have got to be part of this conversation, because we do not know how the residents feel, which is exactly the point that Mr. Berlino was bringing up. I think we need to be very, very careful and keep it very controlled about who is speaking and what we're saying to folks in terms of where we're going with this, because right now we don't know.
Well, I think, and I'm going to just interject with a quick follow-up comment too. And Councilmember Clark alluded to this before, about our survey, that we may be able to throw in a question or two that we can get some good feedback from people now that we're zeroing in on the approach, so that this way we get feedback, which is good for us to have, because then it shows we did our due diligence. We checked with our folks, those obviously responded, so that we have the data to back it up, our decision, because I get it. There's going to be people on both sides, don't touch Bambi, or others that are like, do something about it. So that's it. Councilmember Jackson, but I do have Rambo and Clark too on the list.
Okay, thanks. So I gotta say, after having read Dr. Rambo's report, I am impressed with the report. I firmly believe that he's looked at the issue in as many directions as it can be looked at. I agree with you that I think we do need to seek some input from our residents. I agree with you, Steve, that we need to, I'll say, control the narrative, but that's not what I mean. What I mean is we need to be ready to answer questions. And I know that the mayor asked for Dr. Rambo to attend this week's coffee with the mayor. And I think that's a great first step personally, because as far as I'm concerned, he's the right guy on the problem to answer these questions. That said, based on the conversation and your question, Dave, I think we need to put some sort of a timeline on this, that we're going to get back to the council with a recommendation. I mean, we've got a lot of information at this point. I know that we requested, Steve and Rick, and I thought Dr. Rambo to engage with White Buffalo to ask. I thought maybe dollars and cents was the one piece of information we were waiting on. Yeah. But I think we're getting close where we need to be able to make some sort of a recommendation to the council at this point. We've got a lot of information. I think we get the information out to the citizenry, maybe poll the citizenry, but we got to make a recommendation.
Yeah, I think we're getting there. I think we're making good progress, and the report helped us get there, and the validation will be good. So,
Mr. Chair, just real quick to Mr. Jackson, we did get dollars and cents. it's $500 per deer. So that is spelled out in the memorandum. That White Buffalo says on average, it's $500 per deer for every deer that is extracted. So if you're looking at whatever, we had a representative from Missouri Department of Conservation a couple years ago when this was with the Board of Public Safety and their subcommittee, when they came back with a recommendation. At that time, if numbers serve me correctly, and based on the police counts of the deer, we were somewhere in the between 80 and 100 deer per square mile. And that time, that person indicated that we'd be hard, 40 is a real admiral goal to shoot for, 40 per square mile. I've seen some numbers that talk about getting down to 20 per square mile. That's a pretty difficult thing to do. But if you do the math and you figure out, how many deer that would entail, at $500 a deer, you're looking at quite a bit of money. Well, this report indicates that there are 6 hot zones, if you will, which comprise a little over 30 square miles. Okay, where there's the larger concentrations of deer, but you're looking at, you're looking anywhere from $500,000 to $1 million. And then depending on what target percentage you're trying to hit per, how many deer per square mile, but it's a 6 and potentially 7-figure number at $500 a deer.
Okay, I think Councilmember Rambo was up before Councilmember Clark, and then I believe Councilmember Nye, are you still follow up? Okay.
So there's a lot less. it's a big problem, and I think we should try to roll forward as quickly as we can. So that's my opinion.
Councilmember Clark, you're up next.
Yeah, I guess I agree with Dr. Rambo on the going forward on it, but I think that we should streamline what we present, like Mr. Cross was saying, well, be smart about how we present everything and, well, be smart, use the SMART goals, be strategic, give a concise strategic plan, spell out our measurable goals, make sure they're attainable and they're relevant to whatever we're doing, not just a lot of information for nothing. And make it time bound so that we have time that we're going to reassess and know how many deer we have taken out, and did that really take our number down? Just all of those things we need to have to present that this is how we're going to do it. I think having it real concise and presented that way is going to clear up confusion, because the more we say, the more people have questions that, what are they talking about? When really those deep details that Rob has in his report, it's real important to us, but when we present it, I think it muddles things a little bit, because people it's too much to give out at one time. Not that people can't understand it, but it's just a lot. But just to think about presented as our improvements that are going to happen because of this, and how we're going to measure those improvements. I think that's key. Plus, I think, with the cost of the 500 a deer, plus it says plus processing, which Rob had in his report was like 75 to 125 a deer. So that adds up also. Is there any way, Mr. Cross, that we can get resident donations to help with that in lieu of giving food to food banks?
There's always options. Okay. So I think in reading the report, it indicated that the Missouri Department of Conservation, Mr. Rambo, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but requires that the harvested deer, that the food is given to food banks. And I think that's admirable to do that, but there is an additional cost to do that. So are there other alternatives and still meet MDC guidelines to be able to do this? I don't know. That's a very, very good question. But Mr. Chair, with your permission, there's a couple things I wanted to mention. I think it really is important to the city to make sure, and again, I'm going to come back to the very opening comment made by Mr. Bertolino, to get, it's one thing to get council's opinion of this, and that's very, very important. But depending on which way that goes, we need resident input. And I think we really need to find a way to get a good sample. The sample we have is not a sample, and therefore you can't rely on it whatsoever. We have 11,000 households in the city of Wildwood. We have 35,417 residents. The sample that we got was less than 1,000 responded. And of that, 72% indicated, favorable to a lethal kill. That's a very, very small sample. And I don't think we can make any rational, reasonable interpretation of a sample size that small. So I think we really need to get a larger sample and fully understand what our residents want to do, number one. Number two, I had indicated earlier that there are alternatives. I had a conversation with the captain this morning. The captain has indicated that his police officers who are vetted, who are trained individuals to handle weapons, long rifles and so forth with scopes, that they would do this. And I think there's something to be said about that. If the Wildwood residents know that our own police force, or the St. Louis County Police Force, and I'm not talking just Wildwood precinct. I'm talking about the St. Louis County, who there are many avid hunters who on overtime, which is far cheaper than $500 a deer, would be willing to do this. So it is something that he offered up, and it is an alternative that we ought to consider, because cost is a factor. And if we know that all other things being equal, that it's safe, it protects our residents, protects our animals, all the things that are important in an endeavor like this. But if there is an alternative within our own house, so to speak, certainly something that we ought to look at. And that was a conversation that I had just literally this morning.
All right. And just, I want to make sure, because we have this under for information tonight, right? So really we can't take any action on it, but I think we can probably provide direction. That would be maybe either put a bow on the presentation of what it is that will eventually go to council, or, what other open questions we have that, need to be addressed. So I would say let's continue to kind of focus on whatever feedback we can give them, direction, so that this way we can move forward. So I saw your hand up, and I think it was yours. And Councilmember Rambo, go ahead.
Okay, so Steve, I'm going to respectfully disagree with you on that. On some of what you just said. I appreciate our police department's offer. However, we've asked law enforcement to do way too many things outside of the scope of their duties, just generically as a society. And in this particular case, I can't come up with a better example of something that I don't believe we should be looking for our law enforcement officers to do.
Maybe for clarity, because I kind of took it as not during their shift, like this is
No,
extra.
I got you.
Extra duty. So maybe let's get clarity on that.
No, and I understand what you're saying, and I appreciate the police officers are some of the most responsible, individuals when it comes to firearms and public safety and all of that. But to my way of thinking, $500, and I went back through it while people were talking, because I felt like I remembered in the report, it talking about costs being $200 to $400 per deer plus processing. So I think the $500 is still probably on the high end. I did the math while I was sitting here, 30 square miles. If we're reducing it by 50 head per square mile, we're looking at $750,000 at $500 a head. So that's on the high side. And that's divided up over 5 years if we only go with a 5-year plan, 10 years if we go with a 10-year plan. Also, to Steve's point about reaching out to the population, and this is just my humble opinion, and I'm probably the newest guy sitting up here, so take it with a grain of salt. I think we're elected to make these types of decisions. That's not to say that we don't solicit public input. I like Dr. Rambo's idea of a public hearing as being one last mechanism for the public to be able to come in here and speak to the issue, but they do look to us for leadership. And we do need to be ready to stand up and take that scrutiny if that's what needs to come. I'm not opposed to surveys, but I don't think we wait on this. I think what I would like to see, I guess, to move it from for information to action, I'd like to go back to the city staff and say, okay, we want you to come back next meeting, and with Dr. Rambo's assistance from being part of that committee, the Deer Management Committee, come back to the next meeting with something for us to approve to take to council, basically. And I think that's something I'm looking for is, no kidding, this is the way forward. And I think in this case, using either this vendor or another vendor and integrating the population. So that would be my
I think
recommendation.
your direction's right on point. Like, we need to have the menu, and we're gonna either be like entree A or B, or, that's it. I saw Councilmember Bertolino and then Clark and Rambo. So
we probably kicked this can tonight too far. I'm sorry, but
still got the can though.
still the can. Okay, two quick things. Does White Buffalo assume liability when they're shooting? Like, Do they?
Yep.
And would that same liability transfer to the city if we got our own shooters?
No.
Don't think so?
Because remember the police officers, first of all, are not employed by the city. They are employed by St. Louis County. So if the powers that be at St. Louis County allow them to do that on overtime, that is still
Their
on their
liability.
dime and therefore their liability.
Okay, all right. Good.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, Councilman Randall.
Yeah, just to be real clear, I love our police. I love the county police in general, and ours do a bang up job. They, the methodology that Captain Mundell was likely proposing is completely different. Apples and oranges to what's proposed by White Buffalo. And I can't imagine that the police without a ton of training, special weaponry, frangible bullets, suppressed weapons, those kinds of things, they would not be able, and bait stations and all the wildlife biology that goes into that, they would not be able to set up a program for anything like, that's anything like as effective as White Buffalo would. And there would be additional costs, there'd be a learning curve, there'd be all these sorts of things. I just think, as Richard Jackson said, I think that's a very bad approach. But what I will say is the deer management plan was crafted to highlight a binary decision for a council. Do nothing or do something. Here's a reason why you do. Here's a reason why you may not want to. And it's incumbent on us, as has been suggested, to make that decision. But I was unable to get it down to the single page that Mr. Bertolino wanted, and it's like 12 pages. But there is a one-page introduction that was carefully kept in one page, and there's a one-page suggested plan. I could easily work through that with the appropriate parties and get that down to a 2-page, staple it together. Here's the plan. Refer to the larger whole, document as a whole for any details that you're looking for. But we've got a lot more knowledge than folks might think, and we have. I feel pretty comfortable that we have the community's maybe tepid support until they understand the ramifications. But I think we can get there, and I'd really like to see us move forward more quickly than just, let's find out more about it. Because we did that with the internet. We've done that with other things, and I just don't think it's appropriate.
Councilman Clark, did you have some?
Yeah, I guess I don't understand at this point what our police program would be. So I wouldn't say one way or another. I think it's still an option, should be an option out there, and we should investigate what it is that, do they have this equipment, and do they have, maybe they have something we don't know about it in St. Louis County, but I would keep that and check it out and see what it is they have. In reading the paperwork that came from White Buffalo, they had a program like that. I think it was Minnesota was on their list of different programs that they had run, that it was done by the local law enforcement. So maybe it's something that is doable that we just haven't thought of yet, but I wouldn't completely count it out after the captain has offered.
The question would be the level of management demanded of White Buffalo for that particular police-oriented program, because it's likely to be similar costs. And we have, we are sort of short-staffed with the cops, and maybe they give you a few more money. These are like Navy SEAL level snipers that do this for a living, and I wouldn't necessarily trust myself to do this kind of work, and I'm probably as accurate a rifle shooter as anyone. So there, I think we should explore it, but I don't think it has a whole lot of interest.
Okay. I think we got all comments. I just got a couple of minor points here that I was holding on to. So I think with Teresa, I would say, if you can get what the police offer, and then we can look at it, side by side as the final kind of like to this committee, because I have questions. My questions are more around where do our residents feel comfortable around, given people running around with weapons, like, are the White Buffalo people, do they have background checks? Do we know what their history is like? Like, I know the answer with the police, but I'd be curious about what controls do they have in place with the people that they hire to do this work? And I think that's a question in this day and age that's a reasonable one to ask. The other question I would have is the 500 the all-in number, or do we have any other potential costs? Like, who picks up the deer? Who's responsible for taking them afterwards? Or does White Buffalo do that all in the 500? Or because I thought some of the cities, I didn't know if they picked them up or what. So did you have a comment or?
Well, I can answer these questions as you kind of go along.
Okay.
If you want.
Well, let me I think
ahead.
that's it. But for me, just where I'm coming from, because, I look at it more of just how people, I want them to be successful. And I think communications will be a big part of it. Whatever step we're taking, that we're communicating with people, because all you got to do is a simple search on West News and deer, and Town and Country's had protests, vigils for the deer. Baldwin had issues over Ellisville having sharpshooters. So I want to make sure we avoid anything like that by taking those lessons learned, because otherwise the optics is not good, even when you're trying to do something to address the issue. So those are all my comments. That's all I've got.
Well, I was just going to answer the one specific question. The $500, as I read it, would be kind of an all-in cost. I don't think that's the max cost. I will say that. But that would be all in. That would be, removing the carcasses and doing the process, taking the carcasses to a deer processor. The city does right now. We do pay, and it's really fairly inexpensive. We have a contractor who does pick up animals on the side of the road, from deer to raccoons to armadillos to whatever. And so we currently pay for that. I could certainly, with the committee's direction, is have a further conversation with the captain. Now, I mean, Dr. Rambo is absolutely right. There are differences between what the police, the officers of the St. Louis County Police can do versus this highly trained, organization. But when you start getting into frangible bullets or whatever the term is and so forth, a lot of that is marketing hype, I suppose. A bullet's a bullet, and our police officers know what to do so that they don't go, shooting deer in the wrong place or something like that. But there's certainly going to be differences. But if the city wants to see if a managed hunt and not an archery, but this type of targeted approach is something that if we want to see the benefits of, or if there is negative feedback, one option is to engage our police officers, make sure they're properly vetted and all of those kinds of things are done, and see if it makes a difference. See if taking out, if people feel that we're doing good. We haven't invested a whole lot of money in a contract with somebody. We're paying police officers on their own time with the approval of the chief of the St. Louis County Police to do that. It's a way to perhaps make inroads into this issue. And I'll tell you, I'm one of the first ones to say, yes, we need to make a decision one way or the other. I am not in favor of kicking this can down the road. We've been talking about it a lot. It comes up at every coffee with the mayor, and the mayor turns to his right and looks at me and says, what's going on? So we need to make a decision. But I'm saying let's just make sure that we've covered all the bases before making that decision, and sooner rather than later. So,
okay, I think we'll look for the next meeting, probably for action item with the information that you're able to pull together, and we can then take some action there. I think we had plenty of discussion on this, but thanks again for.
So 30 seconds or less. The process for White Buffalo is they establish a bait station, they monitor it. So it's a start to end process. I don't know that the police are contemplating anything other than opportunistic shooting, or maybe going out in the woods and killing as many deer as they can without requirement for a permit. So it's a whole different thing, and I just don't I don't see the legs in it, but it's certainly worth it.
All right.
So can we ask for both, basically, for the action item, come back to us with two different looks at this, right? Something that looks like White Buffalo with a personal, but looks like that professional approach. And then a follow-up conversation with the police. I would very much appreciate it if Dr. Rambo participated in that conversation, so we can walk them through some of what White Buffalo does and some of what, and listen to some of what they are proposing as well, and come back to this group next time with both of those pieces of information so that we can take to the council.
That's right. We're gonna have options, just like we see a lot of stuff that comes before us, what different vendors can offer. I think there's plenty of this good discussion here. All right, then we will move on to Public Works. And if the committee does not object, I know that we have a speaker that came for a particular topic here, which would be after the next one. So if there's no objection, could we just flip around the two for information items? That way we're trying to not have you sit through, unless you're welcome to. You can sit here if you'd like, but I think you're probably more interested in the one you spoke about. Yeah, well, all the talk about deer, So I think if that's okay, let's flip it around with the proposed street name change request, which is item number 2 here. That you, Rick?
Yes, thank you, Chair Garitano. So on the agenda is a request from the residents that reside on Old Slave Road to change the name of that road to Madison Valley. They have submitted a signed petition, and that is in accordance with our city code. That is all set out in chapter 515, which I believe I attached to my memorandum for you tonight. So this item is on the agenda at this point for information, not for action tonight, but I did want to present it to you, and the petition was provided with the memorandum. There's a few steps that do have to take place before this should go to City Council first, and one of them is we check with the St. Louis County folks. At least historically, we've checked with a gentleman named Ted Zielman, who's with the assessor's office, relative to any concerns with the use of that name, and primarily in terms of if there's any confusion or potential confusion with emergency services. And actually, Ted was very positive and gave us a thumbs up with the use of Madison Valley in lieu of Old Slave Road. So that seems to be a positive result. I have asked for an email. I'll follow up with Mr. Zielman for that as well to get that in writing. The second aspect it's set out in the code is Joe Vunich was contacted relative to the street name change request, and there is a section in the code that essentially asks us to check into the historic nature of the request. So Joe wants to take this to our Historic Preservation Commission meeting for their approval later this month. So that's the plan, is that this request would go to Historic Preservation Commission for their review and support later this month. So the plan was to bring it back to you for your meeting in August for action at that time. But so far, we did get a favorable response from St. Louis County on it. And I think I mentioned in the memo, I can follow up with the postmaster as well. I don't expect there to be any concern there, but we can certainly do that just to dot that I or cross that T. So with that, I'll open it up to any questions from the committee. And as you have noticed, we do have a resident here for any questions as well. Thank you very much.
Thanks. And Rick, just a quick question here. Assuming that based on our code for reviewing change street name requests, that everything you've seen so far must meet those requirements in order for that to be before us now, huh?
Correct. From the department's perspective, that is correct. Again, it still needs to go to Historic Preservation Commission for
Okay,
their.
that's the only step outside of us. Councilmember Hurley.
Yeah, some of you will remember that a number of years ago, this was also proposed, and we spent weeks and weeks in discussions with the African-American community about this change. And I was flabbergasted. It's my naivety, but they were vehemently opposed to changing the name because there is a slave cemetery on that road, and there was a slave plantation at the end of that road. And they were even though they didn't live in that area, those individuals were very adamant that the city not change the name. I'm just bringing that up as historical data, and we'll probably hear more once the Historic Preservation Commission talks about this. But I'm just saying, don't be surprised if it comes back and kind of surprises us with additional information on this.
All right, Councilmember Clark.
Yes, that was one of the comments I was going to make also. But what is the significance of the name Madison? Is that like one of the slaves' names, possibly?
Councilmember Clark can follow up with more information, but yeah, the original discussion involved around Elijah Madison is the name of the street. And that, as I understand it, and I'm certainly not the expert, was the name of the slave that I guess was buried in the cemetery it is on one of the properties down the road. So that was the original request, was to use Elijah Madison, but ultimately the residents have favored just Madison Valley at this time.
Okay, well, we've got that just right now for information, so we'll look for more information after it completes its stop with the Historic Preservation Commission. So with that, then we'll move to the next item on our agenda, and that is the sewer lateral insurance program. It's a information item.
So council members, I'll go ahead and start this off. I'm sure Mr. Cross may have some comments as well. So we're getting into some very meaty topics tonight with the deer and now sewer laterals. This also has some history, as it did make its way through the city council about 10 years ago, frankly. And just to be clear, be sure everybody's on the same page. So your sewer lateral is a function of your household sanitary sewer system. In other words, you maintain it, you own it. So it's this section of the sewer that goes from your foundation to the sewer main, which is usually on city right away, usually on one or the other side of the street. It might be closest to your home, or it might be across the street from your home. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's even in the backyard. It just depends on how they design the sewers in that subdivision. But generally, it's in the street right away in front of your home. But you do own and are required to maintain the lateral from your foundation to the main. And a lot of people don't realize that until there's a problem with it. And a lot of times that comes up when people try to sell their houses, or it may come up when you find out there's a clog in your system and you have a backup in your basement. So regardless, it's always at a bad time, it seems. So under the state statutes, there is a provision that allows cities, and I should say before I go on, most homeowners insurance policies do not cover it. If there's a break or damage in your sewer lateral, most insurance policies, from what I understand, do not cover it. So, and the cost of those repairs can be quite expensive. And the reason this is on your agenda is because we've had a recent incident over in Ward 8 from a resident who, actually, I know myself, who had a very significant repair over the last month or so. And she had reported to us the cost to her were in excess of $20,000 to $25,000. Now hers was a unique situation. They typically are not all that expensive from what I understand, but certainly they can be that expensive. In the state statutes, there is a provision that allows the city essentially to set up a sewer lateral repair program. So we can levy a fee, not more than $50, I believe, per property in the city of Wildwood to set up such a program to offset the cost of repairing a sewer lateral for residents. So this did make it through the city council about 10 years ago or 9 years ago. And ultimately in January 2014, the council approved an ordinance that did recommend a public vote on a sewer lateral repair program for residents of the city of Wildwood. In that time, and I provided you a lot of backup materials if you want to read through it all, but essentially at that time, the program that was prepared, because I figured that was as good a starting point as any, was to assess a fee of $50 per household for those that are in MSD's area and connected to a public sewer, not outside MSD's area, not on private sewers, but public sewers in MSD area. And the fee is collected through your property taxes on an annual basis. So the program at that time that was developed recommended that we would reimburse residents for repair costs up to $5,000. I believe it was capped at $5,000, which is probably a little bit low now. We required residents, if the program was enacted, to get 3 bids. Obviously, we would generally go with the low bid and use that as the basis for reimbursement, but the city resident would be responsible for getting the bids and they would be responsible for the repair from their perspective, but would be reimbursed by the city up to $5,000. So it was on the ballot in April of 2014. Unfortunately, it did not pass. One of the things I wanted to do for tonight was to find out the results at that time. And I can still do that and provide that to you for the next meeting, because I was going to look to see the actual vote and what the percentage or unless Mr. Bertolini, you remember, unless you remember what that was, I'll look it up.
Rick, I might have that information.
Okay.
I recently just looked that up. And it was, I believe, like 57% voted against, 53.7 voted against, 46.3 voted in favor. So it lost. Rick, do you still have more? Or?
Well, all I was going to mention is I did provide you a little bit of information relative to other municipalities in St. Louis County and what they're doing. So quite frankly, I think it's fair to say most municipalities in St. Louis County have a program in place. So I've got some pretty specific information relative to most of the West County communities and the greater St. Louis area as a whole. Even St. Louis County has a program. Now, I have not looked into, and I believe we can potentially ask the county to join their program and they administer it. I can look into that further as well and try to report back to you on that aspect as well, because I think that is an option, but I can't swear to it at this moment. So I think that's pretty much all the information I wanted to provide you to start the discussion, unless Steve's got some other thoughts as well.
Thanks, Rick. And this one I am passionate because the person that Rick mentioned is just a few doors down from me. And it's tragic. You know, someone with 3 kids in college, all of a sudden your sewer stops to work. And then you're told that if you want to get your sewer working again, you got to come up with $30,000, $28,000, I think was the exact number. So I think that there's interest. Rick, I know when we talked about it, you mentioned that you get a call a week about sewer lateral. And I did hear also Sharon Hudson brought it up. She's a member of our Celebrate Wildwood Commission. She says that she's seen more of these, I guess, come up in inspections. You might be hearing about this actually, but both of you in the business. So, you know, it's an issue as our city continues to age. And I think the key thing between now and 2013, because I was a resident back then, but I don't remember really much about it. So I don't know if maybe better education, better information for people would have made a difference. And today there's different tools like the internet that weren't maybe as widely used back then. like social media. So I think we can definitely bring it around. And there's more stories that like this get told, the more that people will be interested in better protection there. So Councilman Berlino.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. Comment and question. Comment is, I think we ought to push to have this on the ballot in April in some form. And that should be a target for us to accomplish that. And then all the communication to our populace that goes into that. A question, Rick, I think the last time, if I recall, one of the real hangups was that we have so many people, so many residents within Wildwood who are on septic and not an MSD. And that we had to include all of those residents. And so those with septic said, why should I spend $50 a year when I don't even get anything for it? Is there any way we can carve out the MSD population for this vote, or do we have to take it to everybody in the city?
Councilman Berlin, I was going to research that as well, and I don't have an answer for you. I know that was raised in 2014, but I don't remember if they were included, or I thought the intent was to split them out and not have them vote on it, but I don't know. Yeah.
And there might be need a better information because maybe, you don't get billed because you get no benefit if you're in an unserved area, right? Why would you be paying for a service you can't get? One question, and City Attorney Young is not here, but I think he's going to look into it at the suggestion of the mayor, was to see what are our options when we have to put this before people, right? Because when it's an item that goes on your tax bill, you have to get the vote of the folks to approve it. But, he thought maybe looking at, well, is it possible then do you do a NID or a SID or something like that, that only the people that are serviced are the ones that only vote on it. And therefore that only serves that one purpose. That's all it is. So the city attorney is going to look into what our options are for that. Councilmember Clark. Yep.
Yeah, I don't remember exactly which page it was on, but one of these pages of this information that you gave us, Rick, does say that this is for only for those with that are on the city sewer and not on septic, that it does not include, they would not be paying and they would not benefit, of course, from that.
And I think that is clear. They wouldn't pay for it. The question was whether they voted on it or not. So if all the voters voted on it but would get no benefit.
That was going to be my question, was based on what you said, it sounded like the people paying for the ones that actually can benefit from it. So it sounds like it's an education thing then. If we do get it, well, in April, we just got to figure out a way to help the residents, probably mostly yours and my residents, understand that yes, while it sounds like another tax, it's not one on you specifically, but you won't benefit from it. But the city as a whole will benefit from it.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, 70 out of slightly over 80 municipalities have some kind of program. And we're one of a very few. Even St. Louis County unincorporated has it. So we're definitely the outlier here, and all our neighbors have it.
Can this go in Joe's newsletter?
It was already. So, and triggered people calling their agents to find out if they can get it added. I found out some you can get it as I guess an additional item, but some don't, and some you have to wait till you get renewal. But it's still more money than what you probably can get from the city. So anyway, I think at this point, was there another comment or?
I guess, I think that there's enough people that would be given the $50 that would bring the till up to enough to cover all of these. But what if that is depleted? That amount of money is depleted, then is the city still? What you look like, Rob,
This
you
is
don't
insurance.
understand.
Yeah.
Not a pool, it's insurance.
It's
right?
not a pool? Okay, it's not a pool, so it won't deplete that money that's put in there. Okay.
No, Mr. Chair, with your permission, the way it would currently exist is this is a fee that is charged on your real estate tax bill. Okay, it's not collected by the city, which is a difference between going this route versus a NID or a SID. A NID or a SID then has to be maintained by the city personnel, and we have to make the collections and the distributions and so forth. So that is a possibility, in my opinion. Anyway, it puts the burden on the city to take care of that. This way, it's collected on the person's real estate tax bill. It's an insurance policy, as Mr. Jackson just said, and then the person's repairs are covered up to, at least at the time anyway, back in 2014, $5,000. Whether that's still true, but because the cost of repairs have gone up significantly in the 8-9 years since that original memorandum was crafted.
Councilmember 9 and then Jaxie.
So then would it be up to the city, or maybe this would be part of the vote? Because some cities cover 100% and some cover 50% or whatnot. So is that in the policy that's purchased is what that policy covers? I'm assuming that you get 100% policy or you get a 50% policy, and then there's limits on that. And would that be part of the vote then? If you're voting, you're going to pay this, but worst case scenario, you're going to get 50%. But you're voting this, you get 100%.
Ultimately, the council, when this is debated before council, let's say if we move forward in terms of, and Rick and I would have more, we'd have to get more information in terms of what the options are, but ultimately the council would have to decide, get a policy that we're going to cover up to a certain amount, 100% up to a certain amount, and then 50% beyond that, or 25% beyond. I mean, I'm sure there's multiple ways to slice and dice that policy.
And I don't have a fully scientific response, but I feel, looking at the vote results from 2014 of April, there were about 3,000 voters for the proposition for the sewer lateral. And when you add up all the different ward races, there were about 2,500. So I think everyone voted for it. Probably 500 didn't vote on the item, because you can skip on an item, but it looks like there are definitely votes there. All right, so with that, I guess we'll wait for more details on that, right? Councilmember Farmer, you're up.
So I've actually used a sewer lateral program before at my old house, thankfully, because that would have been 13 years ago, and it was a very small house, and it was a $12,000 repair that I was not prepared to make, certainly at the time. But I am looking at the one for St. Louis County. I mean, St. Louis County, it's a $28 annual fee. It looks like there are some municipalities that perhaps we just need to opt in. So but I do think it is going to be, no matter how good we are at this, it's going to be an uphill challenge to get the folks that aren't on this to even understand what they would be supporting. Most people, aren't necessarily as informed as perhaps they might want to be before they go and read the, legalese that we put on these ballots. So we might either want to make this abundantly clear that, it's an opting out of certain things or something. But I mean, this is part of what happens with an aging city. The city's 25 years old. Most of the houses, that are just across the road there are older than that. So, I mean, this is a normal thing that happens in cities. It's something we got to get figured out. But it might be easier to just opt into a county program than create our own. I don't know, but you guys in 6 and 1 are going to have to figure out how to get some people to understand what's going on.
Right.
All right, I think that one's good. So we'll keep moving forward on that.
What's the next step?
Next step on that, do you want to recap the next step there, or?
Sorry,
Yeah, we need to hear from the city attorney, because I know he'll tell us some information.
Rick and I have got a little more homework to do, and we'll come back next meeting with more information.
Cutoff date is to get it on the ballot.
Do what?
Like, there's a cutoff date to get it on the April ballot. It would have to be.
To have it on the April
January
ballot, that would be probably maybe end of October.
Yeah, I was thinking.
Mid-October.
No, because April filing closes for April races in December. So
Yeah, but
Yeah, we
but
gotta
if you're
get
gonna have
stuff
something
on
on the
the
ballot,
board.
yeah, I mean, you have to have ballot language when we were talking about
Got it.
parks and stormwater and so forth. So I think, there's a cutoff for
I'm thinking
the
it's by
ballot
fall.
language. And I think that's somewhere in mid-October thereabouts.
Okay.
all right, we will watch out for that, then get more information. Then that brings us to last for Act 2 for action items. First item is a change order request from MB West for asphalt price increase for wards 5 and 6.
Thank you, Chair Garitano. So this next item pertains to our annual asphalt resurfacing project. And you may recall, the council approved an ordinance earlier this year to award that project to NB West Contracting. Their company located out of Pacific have done that work for us for a number of years, dating back some time. Their bid was opened on February 23rd. They were the low bid of two bidders for just under $589,000 to complete the project. The second bidder, if you recall, was Pace Construction, but they were actually about $300,000 higher than MB West's bid was at the time. So per the terms of the contract, we are allowed to make change orders, and the contract authorization is $600,000. So there's a little bit of wiggle room, if you want to call it that, to exceed the bid amount per the ordinance that was approved. But what I wanted to bring to you tonight was a request from MB West relative to the cost for materials, primarily asphalt cement that goes into the asphalt that they place on the road. Essentially, the cost for asphalt cement has been very volatile, as you would expect, given the price of a gallon of gasoline, and especially so since we opened bids. And I was checking the date. We opened bids on the 23rd of February, and then the Russian invasion into Ukraine was the day after. So a lot of the volatility that we've seen with the price of oil occurred after that point. I tried to provide you some information relative to that in the memorandum. MoDOT in most counties provide a specification in their bid documents that allows the bidder to essentially shift the risk of price volatility for asphalt cement to the agency. As they've recognized this historically, that it can be an issue. It hasn't been much of an issue, certainly hasn't been an issue since I've been here with the city. But nonetheless, they have developed a specification that allows the contractor essentially to bid asphalt resurfacing for the price at that time and then adjust it based on the volatility of the market when they actually do the work. So we did not include that specification in our bid documents for this project, like MoDOT does, and maybe we will in the future, given the volatility we've seen. But essentially, they've come to us and asked us to provide or make an allowance in the contract to make that adjustment subsequent to the bid of February 23rd. So I provided you some information relative to that in the memorandum, but essentially MoDOT tracks the price of asphalt cement, the main component in the asphalt resurfacing that's volatile relative to price increases or decreases. Based on that index, the value has gone up about, I think if I did the math correctly, about 37% since the February bid. So if you apply the specification and the calculation that MoDOT typically would, the increase is about $32,000. Now, I want to preface to say I made a change to my memo earlier this afternoon based on a conversation that I had with MB West around noontime. And so the increase essentially that they are asking for is about $32,000 based on the current price of asphalt cement. And we'd like to essentially concur with their request and make that recommendation to the committee. Now, I would like to tell you that the way we are proposing to do this is account for the allowance to increase the contract amount to the maximum of $600,000. So that's about $12,000 of the $32,000. So that leaves about $20,000 remaining, but we can make up the $20,000 within the existing scope of work by reducing some of the quantities on the project. So what I'm suggesting to you is if we make this change, and that's our recommendation, we can do it within the existing contract authorization. So we won't increase the contract amount any greater than the 600,000 that's already authorized by the ordinance, by the council ordinance earlier this year. So MB West, as a reference, is essentially a local contractor. They're based in Pacific. They've done this work for us for any number of years. They do an excellent job. We've been very pleased with their work. So I would like to address this if at all possible. We can do it again without increasing the contract authorization in the contract. So I think given the volatility and the fact that it would be very difficult for them to have predicted the volatility, I think it's the right thing to do from a business perspective, and I would like to do that. So at this point, I'll turn it over to you for any questions, but otherwise I would like to move forward with this request. Thank you.
Councilmember Bernal.
Yeah, I move that we adopt the recommendation of the Public Works Department.
Councilmember Clark, were you raising your hand for a motion? Okay, so let's get the motion then on the floor since Councilmember Jacksy's got his hand up for a second there. And do you have any comments before? Okay, so Councilmember Clark, you're up.
Yeah, so I'm a little confused about the 32. It's dropped to 32 from 42,000 on the adjustment that would be made. Because I'm looking at this asphalt index and the line of best fit over the percent of monthly increase is going to give you an increase at about 7.7% each month, if it continues on this path. So I don't see that 32,000 is going to cover. When I figured it up, it came up to like 86,000 that was going to be by the end of the year by their formula that they have there. So I'm just a little concerned that that's not going to cover what is needed, and they're going to come back to us again. So are we going to say this is all we're going to do, and then that's it? They're just going to have to bite the bullet for the rest, or do you suspect that we will have to do this again?
Councilmember, my intent here is not to come back to you with a secondary request, but to go with this number. We are planning to have them do the work in July, in this month. So the way MoDOT does the calculation, they base it on the price the prior month, which is in my calculation, and then the month that was bid, which was February, and that's where the 32,000 came up with. So I'm not expecting to come back with a higher number by any chance. This is going to be the maximum, and we can do it within the confines of the contract amount.
All right, so no other hands up. We got the motion on the floor. Then all those in favor of the department's recommendation. Oh, we've got a hand up by the city administrator.
I just like to a point of clarification, given Ms. Clark's concern. I'd like to perhaps maybe think about modifying that to make certain that modify the motion to say, this is it, and there's no going back to the well a second time from NB West. I would expect that when Mr. Brown and I had the conversation about this, when he initially brought it to me, that they were looking for a price increase. I asked a lot of questions. And Mr. Brown touched on several of those tonight in terms of this is a local vendor. This is somebody that we use for a long time. What he did not mention is there were only two contractors that bid on this project for 2022, the other one being Pace, and their bid was considerably higher, almost 50% more than this one. But one thing I did not anticipate, and I would make sure that that is part of this motion, is that this is a one and done for 2022. Now, what they do in 2023 is a different story, but I would make sure that they don't get to come back to us a second time between now and the end of the year.
Okay, so you are asking, you want us to, the maker and the second to,
Perhaps may want to expand the motion to include that this is it for this year.
Yeah, I'll do that. I'll
okay,
move that the amendment to the motion is that this is a one-time adjustment and there'll be no further adjustments on this contract for this reason for this year.
okay. And the second agrees with that. So Carla, you okay with adding that?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, then. Thank you for that. So all those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed or abstain? The motion passes. Last for action item we have here is a proposed city consultant agreement with HR Green for the design of Route 109 and VA South Roundabout.
Thank you, Chair Garitano. This last item has been in front of you to some degree earlier this year. This pertains to the city consultant agreement to design the proposed roundabout at 109 in the BA South intersection. We do have some money in our budget to begin the design of that improvement project this year. As you may recall, we did obtain federal funding for that improvement project in the amount of $1,360,000, and that covers design and construction of the project. So as I mentioned, we would like to begin, and we do need to begin the process of engineering and design. To do that, we solicited for letters of interest from engineering firms that would like to do that for us. And some months ago, and I did reference the fact, and I think it's actually not just state, federal, but also municipal ordinance requires that we go through a qualifications-based selection process. We can't simply bid out that work and give it to the lowest bidder. So we did have 9 firms that responded to our request. We did review all those 9, and we settled on 2 that we actually interviewed, Horner and Schifrin and HR Green. Dan Ron, who's with us, helped me with that process earlier this year. After reviewing and actually after interviewing those 2 firms, we concluded that we feel that HR Green is the most qualified firm to do the engineering and design work for the project. So we notified HR Green and then have worked up a scope of work to do the project and negotiated a fee. And that information has been provided to you as part of my memorandum tonight. So the recommendation to the committee is to move forward with a city consultant agreement with HR Green to complete the engineering and design of the project. The value of the contract would be just less than $246,000. Plus, I am asking for a $10,000 contingency for additional engineering work that may arise during the project. So with that, I'll turn it over for any questions from the committee at this time.
Okay. Any questions or comments? Motion? Councilmember Clark. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I will move that we go ahead with that, but I wanted to make a point of that on this drawing, there's a pedestrian crossing on here, and that's just down from the school. So maybe think about adding some lights, flashing lights or something at that spot.
That comment is well noted, and we'll take it into consideration, certainly.
That's all, but I will move that we go ahead with the recommendation by the department.
And a second, Councilmember Ryan. All right, so second by Councilmember Ryan. Any other questions or comments on the motion with this? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone oppose or abstain? All right, motion passes.
Just have a quick question.
Thank you.
Sure.
I just have a question outside the motion on that.
Oh.
Do we know when, I know that the cut in the road between 109 and BA in front of the temple or that is going to be closed? Is that, and this is not till 2024? Is that going to be closed soon, or will that remain open until the roundabout goes in, or do we know? I just wonder, like, traffic wise, because once the roundabout goes in, that will be great, I think it'll alleviate that, but once that cut through is closed, it's used a lot on school days, like coming and going. And so I just don't want it to back up way down BA, and it's really hard to take a left there anyways, at BA in 109. So I'm just kind of thinking ahead, like, I don't want that to be an issue, or if there's something that can be done in the interim before the roundabout, if that road does.
Councilmember, we can certainly look into that. I guess my initial response would be that the plan that was approved for the development, and Travis can certainly jump in here too if I misspeak, but the plan that was approved for that for the temple, that site shows the road connection being removed.
Right.
So I would expect that that would be completed before the roundabout project would be probably started, frankly, although it's been slow so far.
But I think Mr. Brown's correct that the temple, even though it has been slow at the start, but maybe it's picking up steam. But that road actually will be used for the entrance into the temple. And so it will be closed at the point where it right now exits out onto 109. So that road will not be available once the temple opens.
Okay, thank you.
All right, well then, we've got a couple items that we hope to see in August, and just for your awareness, we're kind of automatically, like, if there's an item that we just aren't able to get to and it's tentatively scheduled for, let's say, June, or let's say in our case, July, and we don't, then we're updating it so that we schedule it for the next month with the intent to do that. Again, it's proposed. So anything else under miscellaneous from anyone? Councilmember Clark?
I just have a question for Mr. Brown. Do we have any updates on the structure 3.3-107 culvert over on Wild Horse Creek Road?
Councilmember Clark, we had a meeting with our consultant, I believe it was Thursday before the holiday, to go over progress. They are working on the project. Frankly, they are primarily focused on completing the survey and the necessary survey work. And I don't believe as of Thursday that had been finished up. So there was some additional work regarding the survey that needed to be done. We did have a discussion about the load rating on that structure, and I think there's maybe more to follow there. We haven't concluded that discussion, to be quite frank, but it is in progress. Dan. And Ron is keeping an eye on it as well, for the implications of it.
Councilmember Clark?
Yeah, I guess I'm still confused about where the signage is that say, the load rating or the load limits that would go across that. Are there some place that, because I know they're not supposed to take the heavy trucks down that direction, but it happens. They do. So is there, I can't find the signs that say no trucks down this way, or here's the load limit you can have down this way. And the longer trucks, I'm not so concerned about. I mean, the weight distribution is different than those shorter dump trucks that are full, or that's got to be really
Rick, is
heavy.
that something you want to follow up, like with the locations by email, or do you?
Well, they are quite simply, they're posted at the structure, not in advance of it, but at the structure. And that's consistent with the other structures, I believe, in that area. I think that's not the only one that is load restricted, quite frankly. So they are signs at each end of that bridge with the load restriction posted on it.
But when they get there, there's nowhere to go. They have to go over the bridge. They can't turn, there's no place to turn around.
So maybe is there a sign in advance, or where they turn onto that road that they could get it there or something like that?
We can look at that, but again, that's consistent with the postings in and around Wildwood. We don't typically do it in advance. I think mainly because it's very difficult to do, and it's not the only structure that's load restricted. So communicating that in advance. I mean, most of these truckers are aware of the situation. They regular drivers, they understand the structures that are deficient. And so I guess that hasn't been necessary in the past. I'll just say that.
Okay. Councilmember Berlino made a motion to adjourn, and the next meeting will be held outside. All right. Second by Councilmember Bertolino, just on the adjournment piece. No, who's going to second it? Councilmember Farmer. All right, all those in favor, say aye. Aye. Anyone oppose or abstain? The meeting is adjourned. Thank you.